In life, we all face moments of challenge, moments when we're tested, pushed to our limits, and at times disrespected. It's in these moments that we have a powerful choice, a choice that can either build or break us. The choice is not to react in anger or frustration, but to embrace the power of staying quiet. The choice, the power of staying quiet. In life, we are often confronted with situations where others may try to challenge our dignity, our worth, and our sense of self. These moments are unavoidable, whether in personal relationships, at work, or in public settings. The way we respond to these moments of disrespect can define us and shape how we move forward. One of the most powerful responses to such moments is silence. Silence in the face of disrespect is not a sign of submission or weakness. On the contrary, it is a profound display of inner strength and control. When faced with disrespect, the instinctive reaction for many of us is to defend ourselves, to fight back, to prove that we deserve respect. We may want to speak our truth, challenge the disrespect, or even retaliate. However, these responses, while natural, often come from a place of emotional reaction. They can escalate the situation, create further conflict, and more importantly, leave us feeling drained and unsettled. Reacting impulsively or in anger might give us temporary satisfaction, but it often leaves a lasting emotional toll that can affect our sense of self and peace. Choosing silence instead of responding immediately is an act of immense strength. It allows us to step away from the heat of the moment and to regain control over our emotions and our actions. This moment of pause provides us with the opportunity to reflect on the situation without reacting out of anger or hurt. It allows us to maintain our composure, to center ourselves, and to make a decision that aligns with our values and sense of integrity, rather than one that is driven by a knee-jerk reaction to disrespect. In a world that often equates power with loudness, with confrontation, and with standing up for oneself in a forceful way, staying silent can be misunderstood as weakness. But the opposite is true. Silence in the face of disrespect can be an empowering act, because it reflects an inner understanding of one's own worth. It demonstrates that we do not need to prove anything to anyone who tries to diminish us. It shows that we are not defined by the opinions or actions of others. When we remain quiet, we are consciously choosing not to engage with negativity, and instead, we preserve our energy for things that matter more. This act of staying silent doesn't mean we are passive. Rather, it means we are being intentional with how we respond. Silence is not about avoiding confrontation or ignoring the situation. It is about having the courage to choose a path that allows us to protect our peace and dignity. When we engage with disrespectful behavior by reacting immediately, we may inadvertently lower ourselves to the level of those trying to provoke us. Silence, however, creates a space between us and the disrespect. It allows us to avoid lowering our energy to meet the negativity being directed at us. The challenge of proceeding with caution and respect for the other person is at its core the same as directness. Moreover, staying quiet requires vulnerability. It takes courage to resist the urge to defend ourselves and to allow ourselves to be still in the face of attack. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. We tend to think of vulnerability as something weak or exposed. But true vulnerability is the ability to stand firm in our own sense of self, without needing to justify or defend that self to others. It's the courage to know that we are worthy of respect simply by being who we are, without having to argue or fight for it. When we stay quiet, we embrace that vulnerability, choosing to not engage with negativity while maintaining our self-respect. Another aspect of silence is that it protects our emotional energy. When we engage with disrespect, we are often expending emotional resources, energy that could be better used elsewhere. By staying silent, we are conserving that energy. We allow ourselves to remain calm, centered, and focused on what truly matters, rather than becoming entangled in the drama or conflict. This is especially important when dealing with people or situations that thrive on provoking emotional reactions. When we choose silence, we effectively neutralize the power they have over us. We refuse to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. In this way, silence becomes a tool of emotional self-care, allowing us to move forward without carrying the burden of unnecessary conflict. Furthermore, silence fosters reflection. When we don't respond immediately, we give ourselves the opportunity to process the situation. We can evaluate the motives behind the disrespect, recognize our own feelings, and determine the best course of action for ourselves. Responding too quickly might lead to saying things we regret, but by staying silent, we create a space to be intentional with our words and actions. We avoid reacting in the heat of the moment, and instead, we give ourselves time to think critically about the situation. This reflection allows us to respond from a place of clarity rather than impulsivity. Silence also shifts the power dynamics in a situation. Often, when we are disrespected, the person who is causing harm is seeking to assert control, to dominate the situation, or to provoke a reaction. When we stay quiet, we take that power away. We choose to not engage in the cycle of aggression or confrontation. In doing so, we show that we are not controlled by the actions or words of others. We have the power to choose our responses, and sometimes the most powerful response is to say nothing at all. By choosing silence, we reclaim control over how we allow others' words or behavior to impact us. The beauty of silence lies in its subtlety. It is not a dramatic act. It is not loud or forceful. It does not demand attention or recognition. Instead, it speaks volumes without uttering a word. It communicates strength, self-awareness, and a commitment to maintaining personal integrity. It says, "I do not need to justify myself to you. I know my worth, and your disrespect does not change that." In this way, silence becomes a powerful statement, one that transcends the need for confrontation or debate. By choosing silence, we also open ourselves to healing. We create space to let go of the emotional weight of the situation, to process our feelings without being clouded by the need to respond. When we don't engage with the disrespect, we can allow ourselves to heal without being tethered to the negativity. This healing is not about ignoring what happened, but rather about refusing to let it consume us. Silence allows us to protect our mental and emotional well-being, so we can continue moving forward with peace and clarity. When we stay quiet, we show that we are grounded in our sense of self and our values. We refuse to be defined by the disrespectful actions of others. Instead, we choose to rise above the situation and respond with grace, poise, and strength. Silence then becomes an act of self-respect. It is a declaration that we are worthy of respect, and we will not engage with anything or anyone who tries to diminish that worth. In moments of disrespect, many of us feel a natural urge to defend ourselves, to stand up and be heard, to speak our truth and assert our worth. It is a deeply human instinct to want to protect our dignity and to fight against the injustice of being belittled or dismissed. But there is another, often more difficult choice we can make in these moments: to remain silent. This choice can be rooted in vulnerability, and it is this very vulnerability that holds immense power. When we choose silence, we're not suppressing our emotions or denying the hurt we feel. Instead, we are acknowledging the discomfort of the situation and allowing ourselves to process it without immediately reacting. Choosing silence requires a deep level of emotional intelligence and courage, because it means sitting with our feelings, of vulnerability, rather than letting them dictate our actions. It is a willingness to face the pain of disrespect without being driven by the need to prove ourselves or retaliate. Vulnerability in silence is often misunderstood. It is not about weakness, nor is it about passivity. Vulnerability is not about avoiding conflict or pretending that the hurt doesn't matter. It is about being open enough to recognize that we don't need to react impulsively in order to validate ourselves or demand respect. Instead of meeting disrespect with defensiveness, we allow ourselves to sit in the discomfort and give ourselves the space to reflect. This reflection gives us the power to choose how we want to respond, or even if we need to respond at all. In these moments, vulnerability becomes a strength because it demonstrates the emotional maturity to pause and not be governed by the immediate emotions that disrespect often evokes. By choosing silence, we also show that we are in control of our emotions and our response. Disrespect, whether overt or subtle, has the potential to trigger a wide range of emotions, from anger and hurt to shame and confusion. In these moments, we often feel as though we must immediately respond to protect ourselves, to defend our worth, or to demonstrate that we are not willing to be treated unfairly. However, silence gives us the ability to regain control, to take a step back, and to prevent our emotions from dictating our actions. It is an intentional choice that reflects a deep understanding of the importance of emotional regulation and self-respect. Choosing to stay silent is also an act of emotional honesty. It requires us to be real with ourselves and acknowledge that we do not need to justify our worth to anyone. Disrespect may sting, but it doesn't change the truth of who we are. In staying silent, we refuse to allow another person's negative behavior to diminish our value. We recognize that we don't have to prove anything in this moment. The disrespect is a reflection of the other person's issues, not ours. This awareness allows us to resist the temptation to engage in a battle that will only drain us of energy and further reinforce the negative dynamics. This awareness is important because it aids the didactic, or words to that effect, which will drain more of our time and energy and further reinforce the negative dynamics. Moreover, silence in the face of disrespect allows us to shift our focus inward. Instead of becoming consumed by the need to correct the external situation, we direct our attention to our own emotional well-being. This inward focus helps us process the emotions that have been stirred up and gives us the clarity to make thoughtful decisions. In these moments of quiet, we give ourselves permission to feel what we feel without reacting in a way that might escalate the situation. It is an opportunity for growth and self-reflection, where we can consider what the disrespect tells us about the other person, and perhaps even about ourselves, without being swept away by a knee-jerk reaction. This vulnerability is not about being passive or submissive. It is about choosing a response that is grounded in inner strength. It is about recognizing that we have the power to decide how we respond to disrespect, and that sometimes the most powerful choice is to remain silent. In this silence, we find a profound sense of peace, as we are no longer at the mercy of another person's actions or words. We are not defined by their disrespect, and by choosing silence, we retain our power, our integrity, and our emotional equilibrium. In a world that often thrives on instant reactions and constant noise, silence can be one of the most powerful tools we have in maintaining our emotional and mental well-being. When we are faced with disrespect, whether from a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger, the impulse to react can be overwhelming. It is only natural to want to defend ourselves, to prove that we are worthy of respect, to stand up and push back against the wrong that has been done to us. However, when we choose to stay quiet, we are doing something much more significant than simply withholding a response. We are protecting our peace and preserving our energy. The human experience is inherently filled with challenges, and it is in these moments that we are tested. When disrespect is thrown our way, it can often feel like an assault on our character, our value, and our dignity. It's easy to be drawn into the whirlwind of negativity, to feel as though we must immediately react in order to preserve our sense of self. However, the truth is that engaging with disrespect, especially through emotional reactions, often only escalates the situation and drains us of our energy. By choosing silence, we are asserting our control over our emotions and redirecting our energy into something more productive, rather than letting it be absorbed by unnecessary conflict. By learning a way to listen to our hearts and choosing the right response, we can create peace and redirect that energy into something more productive, rather than letting it be absorbed by unnecessary conflict. Choosing to stay quiet is not a passive act. It is not about shrinking or giving in to the forces around us. It is, in fact, one of the most active forms of self-care and self-preservation. When we remain silent, we are deliberately deciding not to give in to the negativity that is being thrown our way. We are choosing to protect our peace in the midst of chaos, to guard our emotional energy from being drained by the actions or words of others. This is especially important in a world that often encourages us to fight back, to push against negativity, and to always make our voices heard. In doing so, we risk losing our sense of self in the process. Silence allows us the time and space to reflect before we react. In these moments, we have the opportunity to take a step back, collect ourselves, and decide how we want to respond, or whether we want to respond at all. It is far too easy to get caught up in the moment and react impulsively. We may feel angry, frustrated, hurt, or embarrassed, and in those moments, the desire to lash out or to explain ourselves can be overwhelming. However, by choosing silence, we allow ourselves the time to process our emotions without being ruled by them. We give ourselves permission to feel whatever we need to feel, but we do not let those feelings dictate our actions. Very important lesson learned. To remember that we can let our emotions dictate our actions. In these moments of quiet reflection, we are not being weak or passive. Rather, we are taking control of our emotional state. Reacting to disrespect in the heat of the moment often leads to saying things we later regret, or engaging in a back and forth that serves no purpose other than to continue the cycle of negativity. By staying quiet, we avoid being caught up in the drama. We resist the urge to lower ourselves to the level of the person disrespecting us. Instead, we create space for emotional regulation and clarity. This allows us to decide whether the situation warrants a response, and if so, what that response should look like. Another aspect of silence as a protective measure is that it helps preserve our emotional energy. Every interaction we have, particularly those involving conflict or disrespect, takes a toll on our emotional resources. We are constantly giving of ourselves in our relationships, whether with family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers. Engaging in conflict, particularly with someone who disrespects us, drains our energy. When we choose to remain silent, we protect ourselves from the emotional exhaustion that comes from arguing, defending, or trying to prove ourselves to someone who is not open to listening or understanding. In essence, silence becomes an act of self-preservation, allowing us to keep our emotional energy intact and focused on the things that truly matter. Deliberately showing your truth is powerful and also the more you do it, the less likely it is for you to fight. Remaining quiet in the face of disrespect also serves as a boundary, an affirmation of our self-worth. When we stay silent, we are showing the other person that we do not need their approval, validation, or recognition in order to feel good about ourselves. Disrespect often stems from an imbalance of power or a desire to diminish another person's sense of self. By staying silent, we refuse to engage in a power struggle. We refuse to be defined by someone else's judgment or criticism. We are asserting, through our silence, that our worth is not dependent on their treatment of us. Our sense of self is not for sale or up for debate. This act of silence is also a reminder that we do not need to engage in every battle. Not every disagreement or moment of disrespect requires a response. There is immense power in recognizing that not all conflicts are worth our time or energy. Sometimes silence is the most dignified and empowering choice we can make. We do not need to justify ourselves to those who seek to tear us down. We do not need to prove anything to anyone. When we stay quiet, we are practicing discernment, choosing when and how to engage in ways that align with our values, rather than reacting impulsively or emotionally to every slight or insult. Silence also allows us to maintain a sense of inner peace. Disrespect can be like a stone thrown into a pond, sending ripples through our emotions and our thoughts. If we engage with that negativity, we allow it to disturb our peace and pull us into its chaos. By staying silent, we create a stillness within ourselves. We do not allow the ripples of someone else's actions to disturb our sense of calm. This stillness is not about denying our feelings or pretending that the disrespect didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it have the power to disrupt our inner world. In choosing silence, we protect the peace we have cultivated within ourselves, refusing to let the negativity of others control our emotional landscape. In addition, it's about refusing to let the negativity of others control our emotional landscape. Over time, this practice of silence strengthens our emotional resilience. By consistently choosing to remain quiet in the face of disrespect, we build the ability to stay grounded and centered, even in the most difficult circumstances. We learn to trust ourselves more deeply, knowing that we have the power to choose how we respond to the world around us. This inner strength and resilience become a foundation that we can rely on in future challenges. As we continue to practice this form of silence, we build a deeper sense of self-awareness and self-control, which allows us to move through life with more confidence and grace. Choosing silence when faced with disrespect is not about avoiding confrontation or pretending that we don't care. It is about protecting our emotional energy, preserving our peace, and asserting our self-worth. It is an act of self-respect, emotional regulation, and discernment. Through silence, we create space for reflection, for clarity, and for intentional action. Our commitment to developing responsibility and prosperity is learned. In doing so, we maintain our dignity and integrity, and we allow ourselves to move forward with a sense of peace that no one can take away from us. Letting go of anything is letting go of the problem. When we face disrespect, it often feels like an assault on our dignity, our worth, and our sense of self. The natural response is to want to fight back, to prove that we are not to be diminished, to assert that we deserve better. It can be tempting to immediately correct someone, explain ourselves, or react in anger. However, sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is not to engage, but to stay quiet. Choosing silence in these moments can be a profound expression of our self-respect, a decision to not give power to the disrespectful behavior, and a way to protect our energy. Staying quiet does not mean we accept the disrespect or that we allow others to walk all over us. Instead, it is a powerful recognition that we do not need to justify ourselves to people who choose to diminish us. In those moments, we affirm to ourselves that we are worthy of respect, regardless of how others choose to treat us. The simple act of choosing not to respond sends a clear message that we are not willing to engage in negativity. We are not inviting further conflict or lowering ourselves to the level of those who seek to provoke us. By choosing silence, we also make a conscious decision to preserve our emotional energy. Every time we react to a situation, particularly one involving disrespect, there is an emotional cost. Our energy is consumed by the need to defend, explain, or argue. If we continuously expend our energy reacting to every slight, no matter how big or small, we are left feeling drained, frustrated, and emotionally depleted. Staying quiet, on the other hand, allows us to conserve our energy, to keep it intact for the things and people that truly matter. It is an intentional practice of prioritizing our emotional well-being over the need to be validated or to prove ourselves to others. In this sense, silence becomes a protective shield, guarding our inner peace and preventing unnecessary emotional exhaustion. Moreover, silence creates space for self-reflection. When we do not immediately react to disrespect, we give ourselves the time to process our feelings, to understand what the situation truly means, and to decide if and how we want to respond. Reacting impulsively can often lead to saying things we later regret, or engaging in a back and forth that serves no purpose. It can escalate the situation, leaving both parties more frustrated and hurt. Silence, on the other hand, offers us a moment to reflect on what's happening and whether it's worth engaging in. It allows us to assess the situation with clarity, so that when we do choose to respond, it is with intention and thoughtfulness. Silence also serves as an affirmation of our boundaries. In moments of disrespect, we are often faced with a decision. Do we stand our ground or do we retreat? Staying quiet is a way of affirming that our boundaries are important and that we will not tolerate behavior that undermines our dignity. By not reacting, we communicate that we have a clear sense of self-respect and that we are unwilling to engage with anyone who violates our boundaries. This practice of silence reinforces our commitment to upholding our standards. And by not reacting to disrespect, we signal to others that we will only engage with them on terms that are respectful and healthy. There is also immense power in silence because it allows us to step outside the cycle of conflict. Often, when we respond to disrespect, we are simply reacting to a provocation, and the situation escalates. It becomes a battle of egos, with both parties vying for control, validation, or a sense of being right. Silence breaks this cycle. It halts the back and forth, and in doing so, it prevents the conflict from spiraling further. Instead of fueling the fire, we allow it to burn out. When we choose not to engage, we maintain our emotional autonomy. We refuse to be dragged into unnecessary conflict or drama. Choosing silence also demonstrates our strength and resilience. It takes a great deal of inner strength to resist the urge to react, especially when we feel wronged. It requires self-discipline and emotional maturity to not let our emotions govern our actions. In a society that often equates strength with loudness or confrontation, silence can seem counterintuitive, but in truth, it is one of the most powerful forms of strength we can show. It reflects a deep confidence in who we are and a refusal to let anyone's words or actions define our sense of worth. Ultimately, staying quiet after disrespect is a way to reclaim our power. By choosing silence, we are not surrendering to the disrespect or allowing ourselves to be diminished. We are demonstrating that we are above the negativity and that we have the ability to remain composed regardless of how others behave. Silence is a choice that aligns with our values and helps us protect our emotional energy, our dignity, and our peace of mind. It is an affirmation that we are in control of our own reactions, and that we do not need to engage with people or situations that seek to drag us down.